Hey, what's going on? Welcome back to another episode of OPA to OPM. I am Day Mill. You can find me at Railway to Success on YouTube and IG with my partner Alex. What's going on, Alex?
What's going on, everybody? Another great episode. So we are here to get some great advice. My name is Alex. You can catch me on Instagram at underscore AJTHE, the number one. So AJ the one.
Hey, what's going on? And we have a good special guest today, Mr. Jared McKay. How you doing today, my man?
I'm doing phenomenal, man. I'm excited to be here, blessed and honored to be here, excited to close, open up the year 2024, speaking to you guys. So it's going to be pretty good.
Exactly, man. This is thank you again for coming out, man, being gracious with your time. So we're going to make it count, man. We're going to make this impactful.
Yep.
So can you share a bit about your background and how you got into well, honestly, before we start there, let's learn more about you. Like, where you from and how did you get into financial planning?
Yeah, absolutely. So growing up, born and raised in Atlanta, Georgia, Stone Mountain, Georgia to be exact. And growing up, I had both my parents worked in government.
Okay.
So my dad worked in county government, Fulton County, the largest county north of Miami, south of D.C., east of Texas.
Okay.
Right. So it's pretty much the biggest county in the entire southeast, all those states there. And then my mom worked in state government. She actually ran a local conference center for a community college.
Okay.
So you had two conference centers. So both of them worked in government. And I never saw myself in financial services, never saw myself in entrepreneurship, never saw myself as a business owner. For me, growing up, I wanted to be the next Derek Jeter. That was just like the goal that I had. I was a big baseball guy. My dad played softball.
Braves?
Big Braves fan, absolutely. Big Andrew Jones, Chipper Jones fan growing up. So that was what I wanted to do.
Okay.
So got the opportunity to go play baseball in college. Played at the University of New Orleans, D1 level. So we played all the big schools, LSU, Alabama, Arkansas, Missouri, Texas. You name a school in the SEC, I've probably been to it. And so I had a great time out there, graduated, and didn't get drafted. And had to figure out what I wanted to do kind of after that. So came back to Atlanta, started working in corporate America, got introduced to financial services. I would say I sat down with a guy who's been in the industry for over a decade, and he taught me more about money and finances in a 90-minute conversation than I did in my 4 years of business school.
Wow.
And at that point, I was like, man, they're not teaching us really how to really build wealth and really make money. And so I knew all my friends that were engineers, IT professionals, nurses, what have you, they didn't understand how money works. And so I ended up getting started because I was like, hey, I want to go out there and share and educate others when it comes to money and finances. And so I got started in the industry part-time. I think one of the coolest things about what we do at PHP is we give people the opportunity to go out there and educate others on a part-time basis.
Right.
So that way they're able to keep their full-time job, keep their security, pay their bills, but also build a business on a part-time basis where they want to increase some income, make more money, put their kid in private school, or maybe they eventually want to go full-time like I did. I was part-time for 15 months, ended up transitioning full-time in 2019, and I've been full-time ever since.
Nice.
So opened up my own office after COVID, 2021, ran that, and ended up coming up here to the DMV area earlier this year in January. And it's been a blessing, man. I love what we're building up here, what we're doing. I've been here for 11 months, man. We run the number one office in the company on the East Coast here.
Wow.
So it's pretty big. It's pretty phenomenal and excited for what we're doing. But looking to build offices all around the Beltway and up and down the East Coast.
That's dope, man. That's dope.
Yeah.
So is that one conversation inspired you to get into financial services?
It did, because it was like, man, if I didn't know this, my parents don't know this, my friends don't know this, there's a ton of people that need to know this information.
Right.
And so for me, it was I'm very big on opportunities, right? It's like, studying, being in business school, you understand when opportunities are available, how are you going to access it? And so in our business, the average agent is a 60-year-old Caucasian male. And so there's nothing wrong being 60 Caucasian or male, right? But for me, I saw an opportunity where, hey, when I got started, I was a 22-year-old African-American male, completely opposite than what the rest of the industry looked like. And so I saw where America was going as, hey, we need more younger individuals teaching financial literacy. And so it was an opportunity for me where, hey, I can build a business on a part-time basis, eventually go full-time, and help a lot of people learn about money and finances, because there's very few people at my age, at my demographic, at my level doing it the way I want to do it.
Dope. That's dope. All right. So for entrepreneurs, how crucial is it to separate personal and business finances?
Oh, it's huge. It's so important. For me, as a mentor and a coach to a lot of entrepreneurs, and also having a lot of entrepreneurs as clients, it's very important because when a tax man comes knocking, you got to make sure you got the right accounting done for you, right? And so you want to make sure you're not putting personal things as business expenses. You want to make sure that you are doing the things that are business expenses, actually writing them off. Because I tell people all the time, when I look at a country's tax code, I look at it as it's a company's compensation plan. I didn't come up with that. A mentor of mine did. But he's like, every company's tax code is their compensation plan. They're telling you how they want you to make money. And so our tax system here in America is written and built by entrepreneurs and landowners. So guess what? It's going to benefit the entrepreneurs and the landowners, right? If that's who wrote it, that's who's going to benefit it. And so for you, you have to look at it and say, okay, not, oh, they're cheating or they're doing this, doing that. Okay, hey, these are the rules. How can I position myself to benefit from those rules? And one of those rules is being a business owner, being able to write off your taxes, reducing your taxable income by building a business, by creating jobs, by helping other people, things like that. And so it's extremely important because you want to make sure that you're properly having someone do your bookkeeping, doing your accounting, so that you are getting the maximum legal write-offs that you can, because that's the benefit of being an American business owner, but also making sure that you're not overdoing it, that you're keeping those two things separate.
Yeah, because I noticed a lot of people are also upset that places like Amazon or these big companies are getting tax refunds, and they're trying to figure out, why are they getting a tax refund when they're making these billions of dollars? Like, they're cheating the system.
Or tax breaks.
Tax breaks, right?
Yeah.
Because I think it was a big thing where they're trying to figure out where in Virginia they want to have one of their headquarters.
Yeah.
And, as someone who personally had a CPA tell me, like, not so good advice, they were like, hey, you just charge everything to the business card and we can figure out ways to do this and that. What are some of the biggest mistakes that you're seeing people are making within the financial realm of, like, their decision-making within business?
Yeah, I think, and to piggyback back off what you said when it comes to corporations, I think you really have to look at it from a perspective of, if you're running a city, you are the CEO of that city. Right. You're the CEO. If you're a governor, you're a CEO of that state, right? The governor of Virginia, CEO of Virginia. And what is the benefit of coming to Virginia, right? Because if you're Virginia, you got to think, like, I think of politics as like the NBA. If I'm the governor of Virginia, my competition is D.C.
Right.
My competition is Maryland. My competition is North Carolina. My competition is Texas. Because I want to attract more solid, legal, law-abiding citizens to my state, right? And so if I want to do that, that means I've got to go out and compete against Texas. So how do I compete? I've got to go bring solid, good jobs to my state. And we know Amazon is the biggest company in the world, right? I think 1 in 13 Americans work for Amazon.
Wow.
I didn't know that.
That's crazy, right? I think 1 in 13 people work, 1 in 13 Americans work for Amazon, 1 in 15 Americans work for Walmart, 1 in 20 Americans work for the federal government. Those are the 3 biggest employers of people.
Right.
And so, yes, I want to attract Amazon. The largest company in the world is an American company. Yes, I want them to be my headquarters in my state. So, yes, what do I got to do? I got to incentivize them to want to come to me. Because if I don't incentivize, guess what? My competition will. Texas is going to do it. Maryland's going to do it. Illinois is going to do it. Florida's going to do it. So if you want to compete, that's how I look at it. Like, you look at, how did the Los Angeles Lakers get LeBron James to come to L.A.? They competed. They competed with Cleveland. They competed with Miami, right? They say, hey, you come here, here's what you'll get. You'll get this. You get to come to L.A., you get movies, you get access, you get influence, you get the Bush family, you get the legacy, you get all these things. They're competing against other teams in the NBA to get the best player in the world, right? You saw what happened if you follow baseball with Ohtani. Ohtani just signed, a $700 million deal with the Dodgers. That's crazy. But guess what? The Dodgers competed. They competed against the Blue Jays. They competed against the Braves. They competed against all these other teams. Hey, here's why you want to come to L.A. So for me, when I look at companies coming to states, as a governor, I'm like the owner of the Lakers. I'm like the owner of the Dodgers. I'm competing for the best talent. And you can count it up for what you want. Amazon's the best talent. They're the biggest company, the largest company, the company that's creating the most wealth today in America, right? And so it's like, I want them to come to my state because they're going to bring more high-paying jobs, which are more taxes for me, so then I can go out and do what I want to do as a leader of a state. And so for me, that's kind of how I look at it. And so what are some big mistakes that I've seen a lot of entrepreneurs make? One, not expensing things throughout the year. Waiting until you get to February or March and trying to go back and look at, okay, what did I spend in February? You get to March of 2024, you get to February of 2024, and then trying to remember yourself what you spent in April of 2023.
Yeah, it's not going to work.
That's not going to work. That's not going to work. You're going to forget things. You're going to mis-itemize, mis-deduct. You're going to miss out on money that you could have written off, or you're going to write off too much, and then the IRS is going to come get you. So I think for me, something that I teach business owners is do it as you go throughout the year. Like that's what I do as an entrepreneur. I kind of itemize and expense things as I go throughout the year. So then when I get to sit down, like in February and March, my system is already done. Like I just hit a couple buttons, it prints it out, I takes it to my tax person. It's already done because I've itemized and sorted things throughout the year. I think that's a big thing that entrepreneurs need to do.
Like QuickBooks.
Oh, yeah, QuickBooks, right? Okay. QuickBooks, right? So you can use QuickBooks. I mean, there's a ton of softwares out now. Me personally, I do use self-employed with QuickBooks, right? You attach your accounts and kind of itemize. You can set up rules. Hey, this is always this is always this. So
right.
They do a really good job there. But, yeah, you've got whether you're hiring someone or you're doing it yourself, you've got to have someone doing that kind of as you go. So that way, once you get to February, March, it's not like a big thing. It's not a hurdle. It's not a lot to do. I think that's one of the biggest mistakes I see people make. And the other thing is just trying to say something that's personal is business. Right? If you're going to get, going out to eat by yourself, that's not a business expense. If you're going to, get a haircut, that's not a business expense. If you're going to buy groceries, that's not a business expense, right? So the other thing is just following the law, right? Knowing, is this something that's actually a business expense, right? And obviously, consult with your CPAs and your tax professionals to really say that. But I think if I'm spending money on something, is this contributing to my business, right? Is it equipment for your business? Is it tools for your business? Is it a research for your business? Is this advertising for this business? Is this marketing for this business? 9 times out of 10, if it doesn't fit within those guidelines, it's probably not a business expense, right? So just doing the right things by the law, making sure, hey, if I'm writing it off for my business, is it truly a business expense? Is this really moving my business forward? I think those are some things that a lot of entrepreneurs can do.
Okay. All right, so what investment strategies do you recommend for business owners looking to grow their wealth?
I think it depends on what you're looking to do, and here's what I mean by that. When it comes to building wealth, there's no one size fits all. There's no one thing that everybody should have, right? Because someone that's a tech entrepreneur that has a lot of capital is completely different than someone who's building a restaurant. It's completely different than someone who's building a car detail company. It's completely different than someone who's building a tour business, right? Each individual business has an individual need, right? Now, what are some things that I think every business owner should have? I think every business should have a capital account where you want to have 3 to 6 months of expenses saved up. And that's not even every business owner. I think every American should have that, right? I think you want to have a separate account. Whether you're leveraging a savings account or a checking account, what have you, you want to have 3 to 6 months of expenses saved up for when life happens, slow moments, everything, family emergencies, to where you aren't having to live off a credit card for when those things come up. Right. The second thing I think every American should have is you got to have a conversation, especially as a business owner. Where do you see this business in the next 5, 10, 15 years? What are you currently doing today to get there to the next level, right? And what type of investments or decisions do you need to make to where in the 5 years from now, you're like, hey, I want to take this 1 store to 3 stores. Okay, hey, what are you doing right now to where in 5, 7, 10 years, you've got the capital to take that 1 store to 3 stores? And the biggest thing, I think, one of the best kept secrets in America is leveraging insurance to actually build wealth for yourself, right? When a lot of people I sit with and talk with, they're talking insurance, they're like, oh, well, that's for my kids and grandkids. And yeah, insurance does that. But today, you can leverage insurance yourself, leverage it to build wealth for yourself. I just sat with a guy, what was that? I just sat with a guy a couple of days ago, and we're looking to take money, put it in a life insurance policy. In the next 3 to 5 years, he's going to access that cash and go and buy 2 to 3 homes to go put on Airbnb and things like that. And so what you're able to do with today's type of insurance is phenomenal. The biggest thing is that a lot of people just aren't talking about it. Right. And a lot of people just aren't educated on how you can actually leverage insurance today.
So for people who have either the funds or they don't have the funds and they're trying to figure out which path to go through, some people are risk averse. Some people are like, nah, just let's go for it. how do they manage the emotions and the direction, or how do they build a path to start figuring out, all right, this is the risk tolerance I can handle, this is what's going to stretch me a little bit, and this is too much?
No, I think that's very key, and I think you're absolutely right. Everyone has their own level. Everybody has their own risk tolerance. Some people are very conservative, right? Some people are a little bit more moderate, and then some people are very risky, right? I think they all have their different things that kind of make sense for them and the reason why they're that way. Something that I'm very big on is I call it the 3 ways that money can grow.
Okay.
So no matter how much or how little money you have, whether you're Jeff Bezos or a guy working minimum wage, your money can only grow 3 ways. It can grow fixed, it can grow variable, it can grow index. Fixed is like bank accounts, savings accounts, where, hey, I know I'm making 2%, I know I'm making 3%, I know I'm making 0.5% at Chase, at Wells Fargo, what have you, which is great because you always know what you're going to make, but 9 times out of 10, it's really not a whole lot, right? It's very low, especially with your savings accounts today, very low, not a great place to put your money long term, but we want to have it so that our money is accessible and liquid, right? Then the second way is variable, right? Now that's stocks, that's mutual funds, that's crypto, that's foreign exchange, that's 401ks, IRAs, TSPs, 403bs, any employee-sponsored retirement plans, where it can go up, it go down based on what the market does, right? Completely out of our control. Sometimes it's up, it's great. Sometimes it's down, it's not good, right? Last year, the market was negative 19%, the second worst year in 2 decades. Right, the second worst year since 2007, and so that wasn't a great year for a lot of people that had those accounts. Right. But for some people that are a little bit more risky, they're like, hey, I'm doing this and I'm okay with that, and that's totally fine. And then the third way is indexed. Right, index is something that you can leverage mostly through insurance, where you're able to get growth but no losses. Right, so that's something that I think everybody should have, because whether you're conservative or you're risky, you probably want to grow your money and you don't want to risk losing it, right? And so that gives you the best of both worlds, where you can get the growth of the market without the losses. And then the thing is that I don't think one place is better than others. I think you want to be diversified across all three, right? The difference is what your percentages is. So if you're a conservative person, maybe you're 60% fixed, 10% variable, right, and 30% index. Cool. If you're more risky, maybe you're 10% fixed, 30%, variable, or 50% variable, and then 40% or 40% index, right? I think you got to figure out what percentages do you want to do based on how risky you are or how conservative you are. But that's going to be dictated on your age. It's going to be dictated on your income. It's going to be dictated on your wealth. Because the older you get, you're probably going to be less and less and less risky. Right. Because you don't got time to make up for losses, right? While the more income you're making $500,000, $750,000, $1 million a year, you can be risky, right? Because you can afford to lose something. Same thing with net worth. You're worth $500,000, you're worth $1 million, you're worth $5 million, $10 million. You're able to be more risky because you have more money that you're able to risk, right? So I think that's the biggest thing, is figuring out what's your risk tolerance and then creating a solid percentage based on those 3 ways that money grows.
Okay. All right, so what are some tax strategies that entrepreneurs can use to grow their wealth?
So first and foremost, as an entrepreneur, you're in one of the best positions tax-wise because you're able to write off your expenses. So what does that mean? Let's say you make $100,000 in your business, but to make that $100,000, it costs you $40K of expenses, right? Buying materials, maybe driving to places, maybe flying to certain conventions, buying certain systems, right? You've got a Zoom, you've got a Calendly, all these different things you have to have as entrepreneurs, no matter what you're doing, right? Right. So the IRS isn't going to look at you as if you made $100K. The IRS is going to look at you as if you made $60K because you actually have $40,000 of expenses. That's one of the best benefits of being an entrepreneur in this country, right? And again, that's what it goes back to. Our tax system was built for entrepreneurs by entrepreneurs, so it's going to benefit entrepreneurs, right? A mentor of mine, he says, there's no Russian dream, there's no Australian dream, there's no Spanish dream, right? There's only one dream. It's the American dream. Why is that? Because this country was built for and by entrepreneurs. And so you got to be an entrepreneur to get the benefits of America. I think what's happening today is a lot of people have forgotten that. Right. And they're complaining, oh, why is America not good for me? America is hard, right? It's all these things. And I'm not saying America is perfect, because it's 100% not. But I think in today's world, anything is possible, right? And I think if you're seeing people from other countries come here and be successful, as an American, you've got to ask yourself, what's the difference between them and me, right? If they're able to come from this country and that country, and they're able to learn a different language, build a network, create a brand, create a whatever, right? And then, their kids and their grandkids are taken care of. What's the difference between that person and me? Were they working harder than me? Were they more focused than me? Were they more dedicated than me? Did they just think bigger than me? Did they not take other people's excuses like I did? You've got to ask yourself, what did they do that I haven't done? And that's something that I'm very big on is if you study entrepreneurs and what they did, 9 times out of 10, they had habits, they had actions that most people aren't willing to take. And so for you, if you're wanting to be an entrepreneur, you got to understand you're probably going to be misunderstood. You're probably going to be talked about. People are probably going to say, why are you working so hard? Why are you doing that? Why are you working on weekends? What does this mean? But in 10, 15, 20 years, it's all going to be worth it.
You'll see that separation.
You'll see that separation, right?
Yeah.
I was listening to the founder of Papa John's kind of tell his story, and he talked about for, I think, 7 or 8 years, he worked 15-hour days, 6 days a week, half a day on Sundays. For 7 years. And you have to think, how many people are willing to do that? How many people are willing to work 15-hour days, 6 days a week, half a day on Sunday for 7 straight years?
Not many.
Not many.
Not many.
And that's why he's worth, whatever he's worth, right? That's why he's built where everyone know who Papa John's is. You say Papa John's, you automatically think of the logo. You automatically think of better ingredients, better pizza, right? Why? Because that's the type of work ethic that it takes to build something like that. So I think what has to happen is we've got to really get back to telling entrepreneurial stories, right? We see guys like Bezos and Buffett and Zuckerberg, and we see them a decade after they got started. But most people don't see those first 5 years.
Yep.
Most people don't see when you're in survival mode.
It looked like the overnight success.
Overnight success, right? Overnight success is someone that's been struggling for 8, 9, 10 years, right?
Right.
And like if you read a story about Bezos, some of the things he's doing now, he talked it like it's crazy. There's a video or there's a printout of he actually spoke at his high school graduation. He's a valedictorian of his high school. He spoke at his valedictorian. This is 1990s. And he's talking about going to the moon. In the freaking 90s, 30 years ago. So like you see what he's doing now, yeah, this guy had a vision 30 years ago that this is what he wanted to do. He wanted to take people to the moon. He was determined. How many people had a vision in high school that they gave up at 20 years old? Yeah. That they gave up at 22?
Because they
gave up at 25 because they get burnt out. Someone gets tells them it's not going to happen. Oh, you're thinking crazy. You'll never do that. The difference is he just didn't give up on his goal.
Right.
He didn't give up on his vision. He saw an opportunity. Like you think about Amazon. Amazon is a crazy business story. Bezos is a guy that was a Wall Street guy. He was a Wall Street guy, and out of nowhere, he comes up with this wild idea to create an online bookstore. And he literally takes 5 of his best friends and drives across the country from New York to Seattle to found Amazon. And the only reason he names it Amazon was because in the early days of the internet, all of the search results were alphabetical. So he wanted to come up with something with an A. He's like, oh, Amazon, that's a big river. We're going to build a really big company. And it starts with the A. Let's name it Amazon. That's the only reason he did it, right? And it's like you really listen to individuals, like how they got started, what they did. You look at Ray Kroc at McDonald's. You look at any major business today, even like modern companies. You look at the guy that started Talenti. You look at the guy, Robert Refkin. I read his book, the founder of Compass Real Estate. I highly suggest if you're an entrepreneur, you need to study successful entrepreneurs because what you're going to find is a lot of the struggles and the issues and the challenges you're facing, they're not only for you. Yeah. Every entrepreneur goes through it. The problem is we're just not out here sharing that message. We see someone 10, 15, 20 years later after starting, we have no idea what those first 3 years were like for them. Right. And I think that's the biggest difference.
Yeah, I think social media also has, like, as it evolves, it's starting to grow into that issue.
That's true.
Because a lot of people are starting to only post their wins. They're only posting the lifestyle. They're only posting the wins and the success stories of everything that they're doing, but they're not showing, what's happening behind the scenes, right?
Yeah.
And so you had brought up something else interesting. I'm about to lose a thought, but it was kind of like the effect of just like Amazon just getting that grassroots start, right? And trying to understand, like, how do we grow into something a little bit different? How do we grow into something bigger? But how do we establish ourselves?
1 second, pause it right quick.
Okay.
Pause it right quick.
All right, so basically about the start with Amazon. A lot of people start that grassroots Amazon kind of effect where it's like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going to just try to bootstrap it and try to get things going. And so one of the things that I was also aware of is just like that you have around 3 years to quote unquote turn a profit. And so a lot of people, or what I've done in certain situations, is try to set it up so that, all right, cool, I know I need subscriptions. I know I need materials. I know I need this, that, and whatever. So I'm going to try to run a business to make sure that it may not turn a profit, but that can cut down my taxable income.
For sure.
And so when people are trying to do that, what are some of the things that you would recommend for them to reduce their taxable income, some tax incentives, and ways that they can reduce, their overall W-2 income while having this job to help lower that, or the business lower that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest thing is what you just said, which was a friend of mine, they say, your job is what pays your bills. Mm-hmm. What you do is your passion. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times people try to combine those two, right? Mm-hmm. And so the idea is, hey, whatever your business is, build it while still keeping a job, right? Because what that's going to do is it's going to allow you to build a business the right way, where you're actually able to have those expenses because you're not worried about trying to turn a profit too soon. I think the biggest thing a lot of people do is they want to be a full-time entrepreneur early, quick, fast, and now you're a little bit more tight on expenses. Yep. You don't want to go invest in your business. You don't want to go get this system. You don't want to go get that platform. You don't want to go advertise here. And that's slowing your business down. And so that's something that I coach to my guys. Like, hey, keep your full-time job. Let that pay your bills. And leverage that income and whatever income you make from your business to actually grow the business the right way, to where you are having expenses, you are setting the right foundations, you are creating the right systems, you are creating the right relationships, right? And that way, it is going to lower your taxable income because you are probably going to have more expenses than income early on, right? That's kind of the idea because you're creating a foundation, you're creating a grassroots, creating a network, right? But the idea is that, hey, over time, the income is going to grow. Right?
The snowball
but
effect.
The expenses are not necessarily going to increase. And so now eventually the income increases with the expenses, catches it up, surpasses it, things like that. Another thing that I'll say is very, very important to have a mentor. In any business that you start, you've got to have a mentor, someone who's been there, done it, built it, someone you can go to with issues, go to with challenges. Hey, this and that is going on. How do you think I should handle this? Hey, this happened. Here's what I think. What do you think, right? Come to them with solutions, but also have someone kind of in your corner that you can go to for advice, for knowledge, for information. Because I think at the end of the day, when it comes to business, most people aren't just going to give you information freely.
Right.
And you have to understand that. Right. But also you need that information to expedite your learning curve, right? I always say you could do something in 6 years. You could do something in 6 months. You can do something in 6 days.
Right.
The difference is how urgent you're going to be, how consistent you're going to be, and also who you're going to have in your corner helping you along with that process.
Right.
One of the reasons I'm very big on books is because I'd rather learn from the mistakes from other people's than make them myself. Right. Right. I think it's a quote that says, "I'll never be able to make every single mistake in the world or every mistake in business in my lifetime. So why don't I learn the mistakes of others to not make them, right?" And so when it comes to taxes, one of the biggest books I read on is Sandy Botkin's Lower Your Taxes Big Time. It has a ton of value in terms of specific ways. This is a guy, Sandy Botkins was a lawyer for the IRS. So this is a guy that was on the inside and now runs his own business, teaching entrepreneurs, teaching business owners how to properly make sure that you're writing off your taxes effectively and efficiently. What tax write-offs are you missing? What tax write-offs can you be doing that you're not doing, right? So I think that at the end of the day, you've got to have a mentor. You've got to read books. You've got to grow. You've got to develop. I think those are intricate and imperative to any entrepreneur.
And I want to piggyback on that real quick. Don't mean to cut you off, but you brought up a really big thing, right? And that's people trying to become full-blown entrepreneurs too fast, right? I tried that myself, and man, you lose a lot of sleep because you're trying to fight tooth and nail to survive. Like, you don't have that steady income to come in and just like, all right, well, I have my bills paid, and then this stuff can happen on the back end. Now it's like, no, I need this stuff. And you're making these desperate moves to stay afloat. And just to kind of give background, like when I graduated, or right before I graduated college, I was like, look, I like the idea of being my own entrepreneur, stocks, crypto, and all these other things. And so I was like, nah, F a job. I'm not really trying to be here. And went head first into it. And then I quickly learned up until COVID, I was like, man, this is rough, right? And it's like that ego And really, I'm talking to people who are like first-time entrepreneurs, or even people who are just like young. Because I notice a lot more people who are like in their teens, their late teens, early 20s, trying to just dive head 1st instead of having that mentor, instead of having that consistent paycheck, instead of just having that consistency in their life, and that consistency then bleeds over into the business.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you mentioned it earlier. What social media has done is it creates a false narrative of what being an entrepreneur means and also looks like. And so I think everybody wants the glitz and glam and the freedom of entrepreneurship, but they don't know the back end, the work ethic, the long nights, all the things that come with it, right?
Right.
And so, that's most people. I work with a lot of people, and they make that mistake of going full time too soon, and then you do have to figure out, okay, what now, right? And so you've got to have that freedom, that flexibility to know whether you do business with me or not. It's not going to make or break my lifestyle. It's not going to make or break my rent payment. It's not going to make or break my car payment. But on the other side of that, you are eventually going to have to make a decision.
Right.
You are eventually going to have to go 100% in if you truly, truly, truly want to live a life of freedom and significance. Now, if you want to make extra $500, $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 a month, you can probably do that on a part-time basis. But if you really want to make 10 grand a month, 15 grand a month, 20 grand a month, 50 grand a month, 100K a month, you're going to have to eventually go ahead and go all in, go full time. The difference is not doing it too early. The difference is creating the right systems in place, creating the right relationships in place, having the right mentors in place, having the right people in your corner, hiring other staff, things like that. Something that I think a lot of entrepreneurs make the mistake of is working in the business too much and not working on the business, right? As a CEO, you are a chief executive officer. You're not an administration assistant. You're not someone that's doing medial tasks. As a CEO, your job 100% is to lead, create vision, set guidance, and to go business development, right? But a lot of times as CEOs, we're not able to do that because
We're
too much in the weeds, too much in the small things. And so, again, that's why I think having a full-time role gives you that flexibility, because you're actually able to go out there and hire staff to do those things, right? Create those relationships, create those things. And now when you go full-time, now you've already built relationships and communication and relationships with people where now you have less on your plate, and now you can just go out there and develop business rather than trying to deal with, what do I do once a business is developed? How do I keep it going? How do I do this? How do I do that? And you look at, a lot of big-time entrepreneurs, they created solid people around them first, and then they exploded.
Yeah.
Because, if you want to go somewhere fast, go by yourself. If you want to go somewhere far, do it with other people. So you got to have good people to do it with you for sure.
Okay. So we see like one of the hardest things for entrepreneurs is to save for retirement, because, as you said, like everything, when you're starting out, it's a grind, and so you're trying to make every dollar last or count. Absolutely. So what are some ways that entrepreneurs can start saving for retirement?
Absolutely. I think one of the biggest things with entrepreneurs is we don't think about retirement. We don't think about what is our succession plan for this business. Do we want to give this to our kids? Right. Do we want to sell this one day? Do we want to take it public? Do we want to get bought out? What do we want to do? Do we want to franchise it? What's the end goal, right? Something I believe in is you got to start with the end in mind. And so if you know, hey, this is the life you want to live, or this is the impact you want to have, or this is the mission you want to stand for, okay, how do we get that to be your reality, right? So starting with the end in mind is very important. The other thing is, as entrepreneurs, we don't think about retirement. We think we want to run this business for life, right? But in reality, that's not the case, right? Eventually, your body, your mind, or something isn't going to allow you to continue to run your business, right? You just don't want to anymore. It's a different market. It's a different generation. Your body breaks down. Your mind slows down. You just have a different vision and purpose for your life, right? And so you've got to start with that now, because as entrepreneurs, you don't have a 401k. As entrepreneurs, you don't have a TSP. You've got to build that for yourself. And so I think the best ways to do that is through life insurance, because you're able to have, one of the coolest thing about life insurance is you have flexibility to fund it how you want, right? So one month you can do 200, another month you can do 700, another month you can do 100, another month you can not do anything, another month you can do 500, right? So that flexibility comes with certain policies. The money's going to grow. It's going to grow tax-free because it's in life insurance. You're going to be able to access that money to buy more properties, buy more businesses, grow your business, hire more people, expand, retire, do whatever you want to do. So I think one of the best assets any business can have is having a life insurance policy on the CEOs, on any other key employees in that business. There's a concept called BOLI, right? So BOLI is an acronym. It stands for BOLI.
Okay.
Right? That's bank-owned life insurance. Now, you're Chase, right? You're Wells Fargo. You're Bank of America. You got $1 trillion in assets, worth $1 billion. Why do you need life insurance, right? The reason is because here's what banks do. They buy life insurance policies on their CEOs, their CFOs, their CMOs, their board members, their key executives, right? Why? Because life insurance grows, never loses, never pays taxes, and you can access it whenever you want. There's no other place that does all 4. Some places do 2, nobody does 3, nobody does 4. Only life insurance, right? I'm going to say that again. It grows, it never loses, you can access it, and it grows tax-free. Nothing does all of those, right?
Cheat code.
It's a cheat code, right? And so it's actually, if you look it up, life insurance is a tier 1 asset on a bank's balance sheet, right? So it's one of the safest and most guaranteed types of assets any bank can have. And if you're like, hey, how much insurance does my bank have, right? You can actually look it up, right? Go to FDIC.com. You're an American citizen. Every bank in America is a public bank, pretty much. They have to legally show you their books, right? Again, one thing I think as Americans we don't leverage enough is the transparency that we get in America, right? Like, we don't live in China or Iran. You can look up and see what is a company's balance sheet, what is a company's profit and loss statement. You can see this. This is all public, right? If they're a public company, you can all see this. That's the idea of being public, right? That you have to show your transparency, right? So every bank in America is public. And so you can actually go up and look up in FDIC.com and see how much life insurance does Chase own, how much life insurance does Wells Fargo own, how much life insurance does Regions own, how much life insurance does U.S. Bank own, or whatever, right? Whatever bank you bank with. And so I think if banks are doing it, and you look at every major city in America, the largest building in that city is either a bank or an insurance company.
That is very much true.
It's very true.
That is very much true.
Very true, right? The biggest building in Atlanta is the Bank of America building, right? The second is the Equitable building, which is an insurance company. You look in Chicago, the biggest building is, I think it's the John Hancock building is top 3. John Hancock's an insurance company. I think it's another, Chubb is an insurance company. That's another big building out there, right? So if you look at pretty much every major city in America, the largest building is going to be a bank or an insurance company. That means I should probably do what they're doing. And what they're doing is leveraging life insurance. So that would be my biggest thing.
So for people who see things like 401ks, IRAs, Roth IRAs, traditional and Roth IRAs, why would they choose insurance policies over something like that? Because, we don't know insurance policies. But
Very true.
we hear all the time about Roth IRAs. We hear all the time about your 401k, contribute to your 401k, right? Max it out. Max it to what their, the match is. But why would somebody take money either from that or try to allocate more of their capital to something like life insurance?
That's a perfect question. A lot of my clients ask that. I'll give you a couple things. First and foremost, I'll ask you guys a question first.
Okay.
Do you guys, in the next 20, 30, 40 years, do you think taxes are going down, taxes are staying the same, or taxes are going up? What do you think?
Up.
Up.
Sure.
You say up. What do you think?
Yeah.
Up. Here's the thing about 401ks. You don't pay taxes on them now.
Right.
You pay taxes on them
Later.
later, right? When you're 59 and a half and you start accessing it. So here's a question I ask every client. If you think taxes are going up in the next 20 or 30 years, why would you put your money in a position to grow, but then access it when taxes are higher? So you end up paying more taxes or more money.
Just to add on to that, inflation in the future as well. So the money's going to be worth less.
It's gonna be worth less.
Paying taxes on top of that.
It's worth less and you're paying more in taxes. I'm sorry, that just don't make sense to me, right? And so when you look at 401ks and IRAs, now I'm not saying it. Here's the other side. It doesn't have to be a if. It should be an and.
Okay.
Right? Because again, you want to have your money diversified across all 3.
Right.
You want to have your money in fixed, your money in variable, and your money in indexed. Right? The issue is that we're only taught fixed and variable. We're not taught indexed, and that's obviously on purpose because the index grows tax free. So the government doesn't want you to put your money there because they're never going to get paid on it.
Right.
But they know, hey, if you put your money in a 401k, you put your money in a TSP, you put your money in an IRA, I'm eventually going to get 30, 40, 50% of that money, right? And here's the other side of it. Right now, if you do your history on tax brackets, taxes in the 60s and 70s. What's today's highest tax bracket right now? Do you guys know?
Like monetary
Percentage-wise.
Wasn't like 30-some percent?
39 and change. I think it's 39.4, 39.7, but it's 39, right? In the 60s and 70s, the highest tax bracket was 70%. 70%.
Goodness gracious.
If you actually look it up, Ronald Reagan has speeches where he talks about Ronald Reagan was an actor, right?
Yeah.
Y'all know that. He only did 2 movies a year. Because if he did 3 movies a year, it would cost him more money in taxes than he would make from the movie.
Goodness gracious.
So he only did 2 movies a year.
At this point, you're just working for the government.
You're just working for the government, right? And so here's my point. My point is today, right now, you are living in the lowest tax brackets in the history of income taxes. Income taxes were created during World War I, right, to actually pay for the war. And then they realized, oh, that's pretty cool. We can make money off our citizens, and they never let it go, right? And so right now, you're living in the lowest tax bracket. So here's what I say to my clients. Pay taxes now, put it in a place that grows tax-free. So 20, 30 years from now, if taxes are 50%, if they're 80%, if they're 30%, who cares? Your money's tax-free,
Sure.
right? So that's something that I believe is very important. And now, for those that say, hey, what about a Roth IRA? Roth IRAs are great. Here's the downside of it. There's income limits and there's contribution limits.
Yep.
So if you're making more, I don't know the exact numbers right now as we speak, right? But I think if for single individuals, it's 160, 170.
Like 200 is around that.
Right?
Around that
It
range.
varies singles, and then you double it for married individuals. Whatever it is, if you make more than that, you can't have that. You're stuck. I think the more money you make, the more taxes are important for you, right? I think that's what if you talk with any, what we call a high income earner, not rich yet, or call it a Henry. Henry,
yeah.
there you go. High earner, not rich yet. Henry, yep. Their biggest issue is taxes. They're getting killed, right? You're making $400K a year, you're losing 40%. That's crazy, right? You look at every major athlete. It's something that people don't realize. Every professional athlete is an overpaid employee.
And they get taxed in every state.
They get taxed in every state that they play in. Every single state. They're an overpaid employee.
It's called the jock tax, right?
The jock tax,
That's
right?
crazy.
Yeah, that's crazy. It's legit. And it happens to, I have a couple clients that are consultants as well. So if you're a consultant, and let's say you're based in Atlanta, but you go live in Texas for 6 months, Texas doesn't have state tax, so it's a bad example. But let's say you go and live in a state that has state taxes.
Maryland,
or
DC,
Maryland,
Virginia.
D.C., New Jersey, right? These are some of the highest state taxes in America. You not only have to pay state taxes you live in, you have to pay state taxes on in the place where you were consulting at, right? So it can kill you, right? And so the other side of it is the contribution limits, right? I think right now for a Roth IRA, it's $6,000, $6,500 if you're 50 and older. That'll probably increase this year in 2024. So probably go from $6,500 and then $7K if you're 50 or older. Pretty much for the last 5-7 years have increased at $500 every year. So that'll probably continue. But what is $6,000 going to really do in retirement? That's not really a whole lot of money. Right. And if you want to do more than that, what are you going to do? Put it in a place that grows tax and pay tax on in the future?
But can you really put more than that? Like if you have like $6,001 or $8,000, $10,000, can you really put that into an insurance policy?
Oh, absolutely. I talked with a guy a couple of days ago. We're doing $10K to start. He's doing $1,600 a month. Y'all do 1,600 times 12. I don't know the math. I think it's like, 18, 19, 20K, something like that. And he's doing 10K to start. I have a client that did 50K lump sum in out of his bank. A week later, he borrowed 40K out, went and bought a property in Annapolis, put it on Airbnb.
So, but I thought that there had to be certain limits before you could pull that money out. So what are how do you find those limits, or how do you figure out what's the time frame that you can start pulling money out?
So here's what I'll say. If you're someone that's doing $30,000 a year or more, you can properly structure, and I will say this again, properly structure. If you're not seeing it, then your agent is not properly structuring it. That's the other side of it. You, as an insurance agent, we can do what's best for our client and bad for us as agents, or we can do what's okay for our client and better for us. I'll say that again. as an agent, we can do what's best for our client, bad for us. And by bad, I mean we make less money through our license. So it's not bad. It's just less than what we would normally make.
Right.
Or we can do okay for our client and great for us. Right?
So there's no fiduciary.
So we are bound by our license. There are laws that we cannot break. But if I don't tell you as a client, there's another side of it, you'll never know. If I don't tell you, hey, there's a way where I can have you put more money in and get access to it early, if I don't tell you that, you'll probably never know.
So it's like a no, what's that saying? It's like no harm, no foul?
No harm, no foul. What? No, don't ask, don't tell kind of thing? Yeah. So, are there limits? Now, here's the other side. I will say this. Once you get a life insurance policy, there are minimums and maximums based on what you start with, right? So it's not like, hey, Jared, I want to do $100 a month, and then 2 years from now you want to do 30 grand lump sum. That can't work, right? So once you get a policy, there are maximums and minimums set by the IRS because they know that money is tax-free. They know you're putting money in here, and they know they can't tax it. So there's limitations on it. But you can start at whatever level. But once you start, that max and min is locked in, right? So I had a client that got a policy with me 4 years ago. And then they hit me up earlier this year saying, hey, I want to get another policy because I've been doing the maximum for the past 4 years and I want to do more. So at that point, you just get a new policy with new maximums and minimums, which is 100% okay. But I think that's, to answer your question, there is no limits on how much you can put in it, but there are limits on once you have one, how much you can put in it.
Are there? My fault for going off script
Go
because
ahead.
I got questions now. So it's like, is there a limit to the amount of policies that you can have, and two, how can you really come in and be like, all right, well, I want to front load, let's say $10,000, but pull that money out a year, 2 years from now to go ahead and get into real estate. So how do those things work?
Good question. So first, you can have pretty much as much insurance as you can pay for. Now, will the insurance company ask question if you want a $10 million policy and you make $15 a month or $15 an hour? Yes, they will absolutely do that. But that will show up in your income. Pretty much, insurance companies don't want you putting more than 10% of your annual income in an insurance policy. Anything less than that, they won't ask any questions. So that's to answer your first question.
What if you have like 2 jobs? Because I know a lot of people start having 2 jobs.
You can, as much as your annual income, as long as you don't put more than 10%, they probably won't ask questions.
Is that 10% of one job or both?
10% of your annual income combined, all together, right?
Cool.
So that's pretty much. And obviously, if you got like real estate and things like that, like if you can say, hey, I'm worth $10 million because I own 4 properties and 2 businesses and I have 4 kids and a home, then yeah, they're like, if it makes sense, it makes sense, right? But if it doesn't make sense, it also doesn't make sense.
Right.
So that's the answer to your first question. The second question, how do I access this money? So let's say you put in, so we're going to use the gentleman for an example, right? He's putting $10K in, what we call a first-year lump sum. Essentially, he's dumping in $10K out of his bank. He's doing $1,600 every month, right? You're going to have access to the cash. You'll probably have access to the cash. Well, you have access to probably 8 of that $10K first week. And then $1,600, the more it gets in there, obviously, the more he'll have access to. Now, how does that process work when you want to use it? Let's say you're like, hey, Jared, I see I have $25,000 in my policy. I want to access $20,000 of it to go and close a property. What do I need to do? Well, what you would do is you would either go on the insurance company's online portal, just like any type of bank, right? You got an online banking website. You got an online insurance website, right? A lot of times people think like, oh, insurance, they got websites. Yeah, they're modern just like everybody else, right? And so there's a lot of companies even have apps now. Like I can literally get a loan on my app and get it in my bank probably today's, I probably get it in a couple of days, right? So you would do it. You can do it that way online, on the phone, or over the phone, or on the mobile app. You'll have it in 2 to 3 business days in your bank account. So it's really not crazy. It's really not difficult. It's a real simple process. And here's a really cool thing about why a lot of individuals leverage insurance. Because let's say you borrow that $20K out. You go and buy that property. When you borrow it from the death benefit. Right? Now, why do you do that? You leverage your good health. You're already increasing your net worth because you're buying property, right? So it doesn't matter that you're dropping your insurance because you increase your net worth with the new property, right? But the money actually stays in the policy.
Before you go into that,
Go ahead.
For the viewers, explain what a death benefit is.
Okay, cool. So a death benefit is so-and-so gets a $500,000 death benefit, right? We're going to keep it very simple. So to break down insurance, there's two types of policies. There's a term policy and there's a permanent policy, right? A term policy lasts for a certain amount of years, 10, 20, 30, 35 years. The benefit is that it's really inexpensive. I got a lady, $500,000 term policy. She's 30 years old. It costs her $22 a month. Extremely expensive. Leverage $500,000 for the next 30 years. The downside is 30 years from now, when she's 60, it goes away. It expires, right? That's great if you're a homeowner and you're a parent, because 30 years from now, you own the home. 30 years from now, the kids are grown. They don't depend on you financially. So it makes sense.
Right.
Outside of that, I don't think term policies really make sense unless you're a homeowner, a parent, or you're doing like a big project. Like if you're doing a real estate development deal, that's a $5 million development deal. You probably want a $5 million insurance policy, because if someone passes away during that development process, you want to make sure cash can come in and handle that property, right? Or handle that development deal, right? Again, outside of those scenarios, I don't think a term policy makes sense.
Okay.
And there's permanent insurance. Permanent insurance is the one where that grows. It's the one that grows tax-free. It's the one that you can access while you're actually living, right? The downside is that it is going to be more expensive than the term policy because it lasts for life, as well as you get the growth that comes with it. Now, the death benefit is upon your death, this gets passed down to your kids, grandkids, beneficiaries, whoever you want to use it, right? Now, in today's policies, there's something called living benefits as well. So living benefits benefit you while you're living, right? I always say a lot of times we think of insurance as like a pager, right? And nobody uses pagers anymore because we have iPhones. Pagers still work, right? They still exist. People in the medical field, in the military, they still use pagers. Right. But modern people don't use them. Average people don't use them because they have iPhones that do what pagers do and 10 other things, right? So today's just like how we communicate, how we watch movies, how we listen to music has all changed in the last decade. Insurance has changed as well. And so you can actually use your death benefit while you're alive to pay for medical bills, surgeries, rehab. I had a client, he got diagnosed with colon cancer. We filed a claim through his life insurance policy. He got a 5-figure check. He paid off all his oncology bills, his surgeries, and he used the rest of his money to build a deck in his backyard. Right? I had a client, she got T-boned by a drunk driver. She had a dislocated shoulder, herniated disc, couldn't work for 5 months. We filed a claim through her life insurance. She's 20 years old. She got a 5-figure check from her life insurance policy at 20 years old. Right? Didn't miss a rent payment, a car payment, nothing for 5 months. Didn't work. Couldn't work. She's a waiter. You can't work with a dislocated shoulder, herniated disc. Right? And so having the ability to use that death benefit while you're alive is a tremendous opportunity. And you never know when you can use it, right? You may need it now. You may need it 30 years from now, 50 years from now, 80 years from now. It's always there. So to answer your question, that's kind of how a death benefit works.
Okay. So you're giving your example about the guy you were working with who's going through that.
Yep, absolutely. So he's borrowing $20K. Let's say he borrows $20K from his death benefit. So let's say his death benefit, I'll use an even number, was $500,000, and he's borrowing $20K. That means it goes from $500,000 to $480,000, right? Now the idea is he takes his $20K and he buys a $250,000 house, $500,000 house, whatever. He just dropped his death benefit from $500,000 to $480,000, but he increases net worth by $250,000 or $500,000 from the property that he just acquired. So it makes sense, right? Now that $20K that he borrows stays in the policy and continues to earn interest for him. So now you end up taking $20,000 and splitting it into two, because $20K buys the property, the other $20K stays and continues to earn interest as if you never borrowed in the first place. So that's why you hear people call infinite banking, becoming your own bank, things like that. That's kind of that strategy, leveraging life insurance to not only build wealth for your next generation, but also build wealth for yourself that you can access while you're living.
But you have to have put in $20,000 to be able to pull it back out, right?
Depending on the time frame, right? So let's say we do, I don't know, $500 for 10 years. What's that? That's 6,000. That's $60K, right? That's $60K in total, right? $500. That's $6,000 a year. $6,000 a year times 10 years is $60,000.
Okay.
Now, if you do that over 20, 25, 30 years, you're going to have more than $60,000 in access. But you only put in $60K, right? So over the long term, the growth is going to be more than what you put in. But in the short term, if you're like, hey, I want to put money in here, borrow it out in 2 years, yeah, you're probably going to put a large lump sum in to get that type of access early on. But if you're like, hey, I want to put money in here and access it 25 years from now when I retire, you don't have to put all of what you want to access. The same with a 401k, right? You put $50K into a 401k, maybe you retire, it's worth $300K, right? You didn't put in $300K, it grew to $300K.
Right.
Now, obviously, you still have to pay taxes on that $300K and things like that, which you don't deal with IULs. But I think we know kind of how compound interest works. The idea of compound interest is I put money in and it compounds for me, and I get more long term than what I put in.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. You got a couple more minutes to answer a couple more questions?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, cool. You got any more off the top of your head?
I was
All right, yeah, that was, you gave me an interrogation.
yeah.
But that was real good.
Because that's going to be a lot of questions that
Yeah.
people just have in general, because they're like, life insurance might be not new to people, because oftentimes we think of life insurance as like, oh, well, Aunt so-and-so passed away,
right.
so
That's it.
we need to pay for her funeral
For sure.
and this and that. And that's
Absolutely.
the only thing that we really
You're
think
absolutely
about
right.
in our communities. And so the concept of infinite banking, the concept of just having somebody, pulling that money out, it's still growing, leveraging that because you're borrowing against it, not borrowing the money, but borrowing against it, and then leveraging that money to then increase. It's like y'all remember Forex and lot sizes, where it's like, oh, one lot size allows you to leverage. You buy one, and you actually get 100 or 1,000 or 10,000.
It's like options. Yeah, it's like
Right.
options, right? You buy one option, you get access to 100 options. Same concept, things like that.
All right, so since I actually went through like a lot of the questions that we had, but what are some key considerations for entrepreneurs to pick which type of insurance they would is preferably for them?
A good question. I think you got to figure out what type of business you're in and what you want to use it for. And so what do I mean by that? Here's the first thing I want everybody to understand. This isn't a new concept, right? This is something that has been done probably the last 60, 70, 80 years. I think what has happened is it's now finally getting to certain markets, middle America, minority communities, things like that. But there are countless examples of history of people using life insurance policies while they're living. You look at Ray Kroc, who's the founder of McDonald's. Early on, he actually paid his key employees through borrowing money from his life insurance policy.
Wow.
Whiskey, right? But it worked out, right? You see his McDonald's everywhere, right? You look at Walt Disney. Walt Disney went to every bank in Florida, then no one would fund the theme park. And so he ended up borrowing money from his life insurance policy to buy the land for his theme park in Florida, right? You look at J.C. Penney's, John Cash Penney. But don't come more American than John Cash Penney, right? He actually...
That's his real name?
That's his real name. The founder of J.C. Penney's is John Cash Penney, right? Look it up. I'm telling you. During the Great Depression, he borrowed money from his life insurance policy to keep his stores afloat during the Great Depression. So it's not anything new. If you're a big football fan, Coach Harbaugh for Michigan, when he first went to Michigan, he said, hey, I think it's Jim. Hey, Jim, we're going to pay you $7 million a year. He said, no, don't pay me $7 million a year. Pay my life insurance policy $7 million a year.
Can you do that?
Oh, absolutely.
Like
Absolutely.
they can direct deposit it right into, or you have to direct deposit it.
I mean, at his level, they'll probably doing it for him. Now, will a regular employee do that? Probably not. But if you're the head coach of Michigan football, they'll probably do whatever you tell him to do, right? So you can look it up. Jim Harbaugh makes $7 million a year, and it goes into his life insurance policy, and he lives off of that. Now, why would he do that? Because he's making $7 million tax free. If he just paid him, he got to pay 39% on that $7 million every year.
Exactly.
Right? But now he's getting the $7 million tax free. So it's not a new thing. It's something that's just now it's becoming more aware and more popular. Okay. And so how do you figure out what types you want? Firstly, you've got to look at your assets. I think every entrepreneur, every person, really, let me rephrase that. Every person, you want to have 10 times your income in insurance. So you make $100K, you want to have $1 million of insurance. Right? You make $150K, you want to have $1.5 million of insurance. Now, for every kid you have, that's an extra $150K.
Why 10 times?
10 times? So that's just the industry standard. Now, I will say that's more so for kids' childhood. So if you have kids or you're looking to have kids, that's probably you. You're like, hey, Jared, I'm in my 40s, 50s, 60s, or I know I'll never have kids. Maybe your number is 3 to 5 years. And again, that number is more so based on access to cash if you become sick and ill, as well as you want growth in the policy or whatever you're looking to do. But industry standard is kind of 10 years, just kind of an industry thing. So I think you got to figure out that. And then from there, it's a percentage. How much of that is term, right? How much of that is permanent? How do I figure that out? How much of your need is temporary? If you are a spouse, you have a couple kids, you've got a mortgage, you've got a car, maybe you got some student loan debt, a good portion of that 10 times your income is temporary, right? Because eventually the house is paid off, eventually the kids are grown, eventually the student loan debt is paid off, eventually the car loan is paid off, right? A lot of your what we call insurance needs are temporary, right? So maybe you have 60, 70% of that in term and 30% of that in a permanent policy. Because even after those things happen, after the kids are grown, after the house is paid off, after all the debts are paid off, you still probably want to create some generational wealth. You probably still want to pass down some generational wealth. And so that's why you want to have a combination of both. The difference is what's your percentage, right? For some people, it's 20% term, 80% permanent. For other people, it's 80% term, 20% permanent. And that's why working with a professional is really big, because we can kind of help you figure out that percentage and figure out what's best for you.
So, 2 questions. One, for the people who have, or what's the difference between somebody who's fully healthy versus somebody who may have some health complications, or somebody who may be watching this like, hey, I'm not 20, I'm not 30, I'm 40, 50, 60 years old. And, you know, I'm starting to think about it. I didn't think about it when I was younger, but now I'm starting to think about it. What are those differences?
By differences, you mean cost?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Like, can they put in the same amount? Will it cost them the same monthly? Will something raise? Will something lower?
No, good question. At the end of the day, life insurance is based on your health. So the older you are, the more expensive it's going to get. I would love to change that for people. Unfortunately, that's just how it works, right? If you're a terrible driver, you're going to probably pay more car insurance than someone who's a good driver. That's kind of just how insurance works, right? I'm sorry. It is what it is. As if I'm a business and I'm running an insurance company, I'm charging a 60-year-old person more than I'm charging a 20-year-old person. That's just kind of math, right? Now, how can you get around those things? One is getting it while you're young. I tell young people all the time, even if you don't have kids now, even if you aren't married now, you probably see yourself being both in the future. Get it now. It's cheaper. You're healthy. You get it now. You never have to worry about it for life. 20 years from now, you have cancer. You're uninsurable. Who cares? You got a policy 20 years from now. The amount of individuals I meet in their 50s, in their 60s, in their 70s, in their 40s, who can't get policies, who wish they knew what they knew when they met me 20 years ago, I'd have a list to probably fill up this room, right? And so for every young individual, healthy individual I meet, I say get a permanent policy now because it's cheaper, because you can always increase it in the future. You're locked in for life. You never have to worry about what happens to you health-wise or in the future because you already have something in place. The other side, let's say you are in your 40s, 50s, or 60s. Now, if you have diabetes, can you still get insurance? Absolutely. If you have high cholesterol, can you still get insurance? Absolutely. If you got a little bit weight issues, things like that, can you still get insurance? Absolutely. May it cost you more than the person that doesn't have those ailments? Probably. But we can still find something that kind of fits within your budget and fits within what you're looking to do. The other thing is if you do have kids, get policies on your kids, right? Because now you're putting them in a position that you wish your parents put you in, right? That's something I talk with a lot of parents and grandparents as well. It's like, hey, right now, you know, let's say you just got diagnosed with cancer or you just beat cancer a year ago. Hey, we can't get you any coverage right now for a year or 2 years, but what you can do is you can get coverage on your kids. So that way, if they go through something like this, they have a policy already in place, right? I remember when I first got started in financial services, I was introduced to a very wealthy family. And one of the things he told me, he said, hey, Jared, when a newborn is born within our family, one of the first things we do is we go and get a life insurance policy on them. And I was brand new. Like, I literally just got licensed. I'm like, why would you do that? Like, you think the kid gonna die? Like, what's happening, right? He was like, no, because he said a couple reasons. Reason number one, I'm investing in a generation that I'll probably never meet. And that off the top, that was like, oh, man, y'all thinking different, because most people not thinking like that.
Yeah.
Most people aren't thinking like that. You're investing in a generation that you'll probably never, ever meet.
And when he say that, he meaning that child's kid.
That child's kids, right? Right now, I'm 50. There's a great niece that just got born. She's 30 days old. 25 years from now, she'll have a kid. 50 years from now, that kid is 25. 80 years from now, that kid is 60, right? Whatever. That this 30-day-old now passes away and passes down $500,000 to her child. I never met this kid.
Tax-free.
I never met this kid. Maybe I knew him for his first 2 years of life. So he just passed on $500,000 tax-free. Here's the really cool thing. When you get a policy on a kid, you can pay a policy for 10 years, stop funding it, never pay it for the rest of your life. It runs for the rest of your life.
Wow. 10 years.
10 years.
Why is that?
10 years. Because you put so much money in early that the growth pays for the insurance and then grows. Right? So let's say the policy, so I was actually training my team the other day, and we were looking at a 25-year-old. He said, hey, let's say you put $400 a month for the next 10 years into this policy, right? That's $4,800 a year. That's $48,000 a year. You put $48,000 into this policy from age 22 to age 32. When you're 80 years old, this policy costs you $20,000 a year. Man, that's expensive. That's a lot of cost of insurance. That's $1,500, $1,800 a month. That's extremely expensive.
Right.
But this policy at age 80, it cost you $20,000 of insurance, and you made $90,000 that year tax-free. Hey, so-and-so, if I said, go find me $20K, I'll give you $90K, how quickly would you do that deal? Immediately.
Yeah.
And that's at age 80. Oh, by the way, you have over $3 million of tax-free cash that you can access at that year, at that age. You made, 60, 70K that year alone. Right. That's not all the other years combined. Compound interest. Yeah. So that's what I say. You could fund a policy for 10 years, what we call overfunded, put more into it, max fund the policy to where at year 10 you stop paying for it, and the cash grows so much because there's so much money in there that it grows, it pays for the policy, and has more money on top of that. So that's what he was saying. Hey, we get a policy on this 30-day-old kid. We pay on it till he's 10, he's 12, he's 15. I stop paying on it. This policy is going to run for the rest of their life.
Right.
And so that's how a lot of wealthy families run their life. You look at something that I studied, the difference between the Rockefeller family and the Vanderbilt family.
Yep.
Right? If you look at history, the Vanderbilts were more wealthier than the Rockefellers, right? Yep. I remember reading, I think Vanderbilt accounted for like 5% of America's GDP when he was around.
That's crazy. That's
crazy. That's insane. Like, just to give people an idea, let's say America's economy is a $3 trillion economy. That means 5% of $3 trillion. 150 billion. Imagine one person accounting for 150 billion of the economy. That's insane to think about today. But Vanderbilt was 5% of the American economy in his prime.
Like Elon Musk and Bezos.
It's not even there though. Like Musk maybe 2-3%. Okay. But the thing is, the difference is like that person. Musk is more so about his businesses collectively. Yeah, okay. It was that person was that wealthy. But what happened? A lot of people don't know this.
Yep, here we go.
Do you know that Anderson Cooper is a Vanderbilt?
Yep.
I found that out recently. Most
people have no idea. Anderson Cooper is a 3rd or 4th generation Vanderbilt. Why is he freaking on TV? Like, why does he need a day job, right? He needs a day job. Why? Because there's there's something that the Rockefellers did that the Vanderbilts didn't. The Rockefellers created a trust, and they put a life insurance policy on every family every person in the family and had the beneficiary as the trust and put rules and guidelines and things in place. So that way there's like 60 people today that live off the Rockefeller Trust.
Yeah.
It's crazy. And who are the Vanderbilts? Nobody knows. Like, the only reason people know who the Vanderbilts are is because of Vanderbilt University. That's it. That's all they know, right? And so for me, it's like I study what do wealthy families do. There's a Chinese proverb. It says shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations. It means shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations. What it means is if first generation has a lot of wealth, second generation saw half or maybe most of the work that the first generation did, they probably duplicate half of that. That third generation, they never saw what grandpa did when he was 20 and 30 to build it. They just all got the benefits.
So they know no appreciation.
They have no appreciation for it.
There's another
That's
saying
their regular life.
Yeah.
And so the third generation doesn't have the same work ethic, doesn't have the same beliefs, doesn't have the same values, the same principles. And more times than not, they wash it away.
There's another saying like that where it's like, if the grandfather drove a tractor, the son drove like a nicer car, and then the grandchild drove a Lamborghini, that child of the grandchild will drive a tractor.
Back on the tractor. Yep,
Yeah.
it's the same concept, right?
Yeah.
Shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations.
Let's
And so,
go quickly, cause I do want to get to this.
oh yeah.
Last questions.
And so the thing is how can you make sure that that's not your family? Create the right values and principles. Leverage insurance policies to create wealth in generations that you'll never meet. Put it all in a trust and make sure that you have rules and laws and guidelines on who gets the money and when.
Okay. All right. I do want to talk about, because we touched on it briefly, but a business succession planning. How can insurance help with a succession plan, especially for family-owned business, like we just talked about?
This is key. So there's a specific type of policy in what we call business planning called a buy-sell agreement. This is essentially how it works, right? Let's say you guys own a business. You own 50%, he owns 50%. It's a $10 million business, right?
Don't shortchange us, baby. Don't
shortchange us? All right, it's a $100 million business. There we go. $100 million business, right? Your net worth is $50 million. His net worth is $50 million, right? Let's say both of you guys are married. You passed away. Where does that $50 million go? To your spouse.
Correct.
But she's not you.
That's true.
So there's 2 problems. He now has a partner who doesn't have the same level of expertise, knowledge, know-how, network that he once did. But he can't get rid of her because she owns 50% of the company. So here's what a buy-sell agreement does. A buy-sell agreement says, hey, upon your passing, $50 million goes to the business. Now you have the capital to go and buy that spouse, that child, whoever out. Because they own 50% of the business, but they don't want the business. They don't want to run the business. It wasn't their passion. It wasn't their goal. But on paper, they're worth $50 million because they own 50% of a $100 million business. So you take that policy, give them their $50 million. Now you can go find someone to replace him, and you can attract someone. Hey, I'm going to give you 50% equity. Or you go find 3 of him or 5 of him and say, hey, I'm going to give each of you guys 10% equity. Right? That's how large businesses move, right, and adjust and things like that, right? So that's one thing. You probably want to have a buy-sell agreement. If you have multiple owners in any business, you 100% need a buy-sell agreement. Even if he gets sick, right? If he can't work for 6 months, 12 months, how do you duplicate? How do you replace him, right? He's a founder, right? Imagine Steve Jobs in the middle of building Apple and Steve Wozniak gets sick. How does he replace him? Imagine Steve Jobs getting sick. How does Wozniak replace him, right? How does Gates replace Allen, right? Bill Gates, Paul Allen, things like that. So there's countless opportunities and examples of it. Well, a lot of times we look at founders, and it's always not just the founders. It's also their lieutenants that are directly under them. That's something that I study a lot. You got Gates and Allen. You got Gates and the guy that now owns the Clippers, right? I think Ballmer. I think that's his name, Ballmer, right? He was pretty much Gates' right-hand guy, right? Obviously, Steve Jobs, Steve Wozniak. You look at Zuckerberg, and he had his chief HR person is kind of known as like his main go-to person to help create Facebook culture. You look at Netflix and Reed Hastings. Reed Hastings actually recruits that person from Facebook to come to Netflix. And she changes the entire culture of Netflix. to turn Netflix into what we know it as today, right? So there's countless individuals of examples of companies where you're 1, 2, 3 people away outside of the founder of taking it from a $100 million business to a $500 million business to a $2 billion business, right? But the question is, if that person gets sick, that person wants to leave, that person passes away, how can you find someone to duplicate those habits, those abilities, all of that, that talent, right? So that's something I think every business owner should have. You want to have a buy-sell. The second is you've got to have a succession plan, and you've got to figure out what do you want. I think at the end of the day, anyone in life, whether you're a business owner or you work for someone else, you've got to ask yourself, what do you want your life to look like?
Right.
In the next 20, 30, 40 years, whether your succession plan as a business owner or it's a retirement planning as an employee, you've got to ask yourself, what type of life do I want to live 10, 20, 30, 40 years from now? And then from there, you reverse engineer it. So you say, hey, my succession plan is I want to pass it down to my kids. Okay, cool, that's great. What is your backup succession plan if they don't want it? Because the worst thing that happens is you think you're going to pass it down to your kids.
Right.
And you get to 70, and your 30 and 40-year-old kids say, I don't want that business.
Yep. Happens all the time.
It happens all the time, right? Because why? They grew up in it. They've seen it. They was working at freaking 10 years old in the shop. They don't want to do that, right? That's why they went and did something else, right? So you've got to have a backup plan. Hey, okay, if they don't want it, then what do I do? Maybe I sell it. Maybe I franchise it. Maybe I hire someone to come and run it for me. I keep the equity. Maybe I give a portion of the equity to them, right? You see that in businesses now, right? You saw how Bezos walked away from Amazon. You still look at Amazon. Amazon is Bezos, but Bezos isn't the CEO, right? It's Jassy, right? Or, Andy Jassy. He saw it with Musk in terms of walking away. Well, he still kind of runs Tesla kind of now, but he walked away for a little bit, came back. He saw it with the original Twitter founder. I can't think of his name right now.
Jack Dorsey?
Jack Dorsey, right? Jack Dorsey walked away from Twitter and built Square, right? He was the CEO of Square, and then obviously he sold Twitter to Musk and things like that. But he still retained equity, but he's not actually running it, right? Yeah. So a lot of times as a founder, maybe you don't want to sell the business. Maybe you want to continue the business, but you don't want to be the CEO anymore. Yeah. You just want to be the chairman, right? So then it's like, okay, you got to figure out how can I go and find what networks can I build now to go and either attract a CEO, or maybe I find someone from a similar company who's maybe like an EVP, a SVP, or someone like that. I bring them over to my team. I train them on my values, my principles, my goals for the next 5, 7, 10 years. And eventually I promote them to the CEO, and I trust them because I've seen what they do, right? And so I think those are the biggest things. You've really got to figure out what do you want your succession plan to be, and then kind of reverse engineer it from there. I think that's the biggest thing.
Okay.
So you want to ask 1 or 2 more questions?
He has a call coming up, so I don't want to.
Yeah, we got 5 minutes.
5 minutes.
Okay.
All right, cool. We're gonna ask the last question.
Yeah. So, I'll just like.
Okay.
So now we have a lot more better understanding of what real generational wealth is, life insurance policies, the differences between how to set up a policy, why certain coverages are needed, and things like that. And so I think this is a really good point to really just allow people to kind of just digest everything, because this is a really great episode. So for the people who are really interested in just learning more or have more questions about this, how can they find you, reach out to you? Do you have any projects that are in the works as well?
Absolutely. So if you want to reach out to me, you can find me on Facebook, Jared McKay, LinkedIn, Jared McKay, Instagram, Mr. Wealth Ren. So that's Mr. MR Wealth, WEALTH, Ren, REN, right? So that's how you can find me on Instagram. Here locally, if you're locally here in the DMV, at our office, we run the #1 financial literacy workshop in the DMV. So reach out to me. I'll get you on our guest list for one of our next events. We have crazy events, man. We have a fun time. It's a blast. And you'll learn a lot about money, finances, wealth, entrepreneurship, things like that. So those are ways you can get in contact with me. Definitely follow me on Instagram. I'm always, sending out value videos and certain things like that. But definitely would love to connect with you and all of that, of course.
Very entertaining IG page.
Appreciate it. IG
page. All right, so man, did you want to ask the last question, or we good?
No, we good. Just shout out the
all right,
OPM.
cool. All right, thank you, Mr. McKay, for coming and dropping gems, and again, thank you for sharing a little bit extra time. We had a little technical difficulties, but yeah, another dope episode. Thank you for checking out another episode of OPA to OPM. Again, I'm Dave Mill. You can find me at Railway to Success on YouTube, IG. Alex.
This is Alex closing out. You can find me on Instagram at _AJTHE, the number 1.
All right, man. Thank y'all for joining us, and peace. See you next episode.
Absolutely. Hey, man, I appreciate it, man.